Title: The Lonely Road. As a true story, I want to share a nightmarish experience I had while hitchhiking many years ago. I was a young adventurous soul, full of eagerness to explore the unknown. It was a chilly autumn evening, and I found myself stranded on a desolate road in the middle of nowhere, desperate for a ride to my destination. What I experienced that night still haunts me to this day. With a backpack slung over my shoulder, I stood by the side of the road, my thumb outstretched, hoping for a kind-hearted soul to stop and give me a ride. Hours dragged on, and the occasional passing car just whizzed by, showing no interest in my plight. As the sun disappeared, enveloping the landscape in darkness, an eerie sense of foreboding crept over me. Anxiety gnawed at my insides, but I pressed on, determined to find a ride. Finally, a beat-up old pickup came rumbling down the road. The driver, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a wandering gaze, stopped by my side. Grateful, I hopped into the truck, shaking off the feeling of unease. The driver introduced himself as Henry, seemingly friendly in our initial conversation. I offered thanks for the lift, and we exchanged life stories as the miles ticked away. However, the more we spoke, the more I noticed something unsettling about Henry. His eyes reflected a dark intensity, and there was an air of unease that clung to him like a shadow. I casually mentioned that I was heading to the nearby town, hoping to deter any possible ill intentions. Henry's smile wavered, and something bizarre flickered in his eyes. He suggested an alternate route, assuring me it would be a shortcut. Against my better judgment, I agreed, naively believing that all would be well. As we deviated from the main road, dread settled upon me like a fog. The surroundings turned eerily silent, devoid of any signs of civilization. My heart pounded against my chest, urging me to flee, but I was trapped with a stranger on an unfamiliar path. Suddenly, the truck came to a halt. My breath hitched in my throat as I scanned my surroundings. We had stopped in front of an abandoned house, its windows shattered and lifeless. Henry's gaze was now a chilling void, his voice barely above a whisper as he demanded that I step out of the vehicle. A surge of survival instinct propelled me into action. I lunged for the door, scrambling to escape his clutches. Desperation fueled my movements as I darted into the darkness, my feet pounding against the unforgiving ground. Behind me, Henry's voice echoed through the night, laced with fury. "You can't escape me." Fear gripped me as I sprinted through the darkness, fueled by adrenaline. My mind raced, praying for help to come from any source. Eventually, I spied the faint glimmer of headlights in the distance, a beacon of hope that spurred me on. Like a guardian angel, a passing motorist rescued me from the clutches of that sinister man. Terrified yet grateful, I explained my harrowing ordeal to the sympathetic stranger. We contacted the authorities, and an investigation ensued. Unfortunately, they never found a trace of Henry, who seemed to vanish into thin air. To this day, the memory of that night lingers deep within me. It serves as a constant reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the hearts of strangers. I implore you, dear reader, to be cautious when embarking on adventures, and never forget that reality can often be far more terrifying than fiction.
I'll never forget that night I decided to hitchhike through the desolate countryside. It was a decision I would come to regret deeply. The sun had just set, casting eerie shadows over the winding road. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, but I pressed on, desperate to reach the next town before darkness engulfed everything. After what felt like an eternity of waiting, a rusted pickup truck pulled over. The driver was a middle-aged man with a disheveled appearance. He had a crooked smile that sent shivers down my spine. Against my better judgment, I climbed into the truck, hoping for a safe ride. The interior reeked of something foul, and I tried to ignore it as I settled into the passenger seat. The man's conversation was unsettling, his questions probing into my personal life in a way that made my skin crawl. The tension in the truck grew as the miles passed, and I felt a growing sense of unease. Suddenly, the truck veered off the main road and onto a narrow, overgrown path. Panic rose within me as I realized we were far from civilization. I demanded that he stop and let me out, but he only laughed, his eyes glinting in the dim light of the dashboard. As the truck rumbled deeper into the wilderness, I spotted something that made my blood run cold, a series of missing person posters pinned to trees. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the horrifying truth. I was trapped with a serial killer, and I was likely the next victim. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I mustered the courage to grab the door handle and flung myself out of the moving truck. Pain seared through my body as I hit the ground and tumbled to a stop. The truck screeched to a halt, and I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the throbbing in my limbs. I sprinted through the woods, fueled by sheer terror, not daring to look back. Eventually, I stumbled upon a cabin and pounded on the door, praying for salvation. A kind family took me in, and I recounted my harrowing ordeal to them and the authorities. The man was eventually captured and arrested, and his truck was found filled with evidence of his heinous crimes. To this day, I can't shake the feeling of dread that washes over me whenever I remember that fateful night, a night I narrowly escaped becoming another victim of a chilling hitchhiking horror. A few years ago, I was traveling alone on a quiet highway in the middle of the night. The moon was obscured by thick clouds, casting eerie shadows on the road. Suddenly, my car sputtered to a stop, and I realized I was out of gas. With no other option, I decided to hitchhike and hope for the best. After a while, a beat-up truck pulled over. The driver, a middle-aged man with a grizzled beard, offered me a ride. Relieved, I hopped in. As we drove, he began to talk in a low, monotone voice about the area's history, stories of disappearances and eerie occurrences. My discomfort grew, and I started to notice strange symbols etched onto the dashboard. As we continued down the road, the man's demeanor became more unsettling. He started asking personal questions, and his smile never reached his eyes. My heart raced, and I became increasingly convinced that something was terribly wrong. I fumbled with my phone, sending a quick text to a friend about my situation and the truck's license plate. Eventually, the man abruptly pulled over at an isolated spot. My heart pounded as he turned to me with a sinister grin. In a chilling whisper, he said, "You're not going anywhere." Panic consumed me, but before he could do anything, the distant sound of sirens grew louder. Blue and red lights flooded the area as a police car pulled up behind us. The man's face turned pale, and he quickly exited the truck, only to be apprehended by the officers. It turned out that my friend had contacted the authorities after receiving my text. As the officers secured the man, they discovered a hidden compartment in the truck filled with disturbing items. It was a chilling realization that I had narrowly escaped a dangerous situation. To this day, I shudder at the thought of what could have happened if help hadn't arrived in time. So, that's the true fictional story of my harrowing hitchhiking experience, a nightmarish encounter that reminded me to always trust my instincts and stay cautious when on the road alone. I once embarked on a solo road trip and picked up a hitchhiker on a desolate stretch of highway. As we chatted, I noticed his unsettling gaze and a knife hidden under his coat. My heart raced, but I tried to stay composed. When he started acting increasingly erratic, I pretended to pull over for a bathroom break and managed to slip away when he wasn't looking. I never picked up another hitchhiker again.
If you enjoy listening to scary horror content just like this, then hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you are updated on when I post a new video.